you. Thanks so much, and thanks for coming by, and thanks for joining the session. Just a sound check. Can everybody on the Zoom? Can you all hear us in the room here? Oh, I hope everybody can. So, all right. So, my name is Sandeep Kibey, and I'm from the Navigating Cohort. And it's great to see so many of our friends here. Thanks so much for coming to this session. B2B is a great platform for all of us to connect, and it's happening after 3 years. So it's so good. I mean, we've been talking to each other over Zoom, doing assignments together, discussing, connecting over phone calls and whatnot. And it is so great to meet all of you all here in person, and you know, just see each other finally face to face. So thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. And my intent is for this to be a very interactive session. I thought of talking about building culture because I think it's very timely for us to do that with the theme of B2B connection. I think we as humanity are at the crossroads right now with everything that is going on in the world, Ukraine and everything else. And with the pandemic sort of hopefully receding and kind of behind us, it just makes so much sense for us to talk about building culture and how do we build inspiring and great cultures in our companies, in our teams. And so over the last couple of years, we have all been through this pandemic and really challenging situation over the last 2 years in navigating the pandemic and navigating our teams. So, you know, if that, and since that is the case, I feel like building culture is one item that has suffered a lot in the last couple of years as we have transitioned away from face-to-face to virtual and whatnot. So, in my company, as part of my organization, I lead a team of 14 people. I work in research and development, and we've had a tough time, and I'll tell you why. We sort of share with you a couple of stories and examples of what happens in my part of the organization, in my team. And through this experience, I've learned that there are 3 core leadership principles that are essential, that are critical, and I want to share with you today. And also, just, you know, and then would like to have a conversation because there is such a rich experience here in this room. I mean, all of us have that common thread. We've gone through that and would love to hear your thoughts on what has worked in your part of the organization in terms of building and succeeding great. So with that, if this works. All right, I'm not sure. Friends, sorry about this. Turns out I have tons of animation, so this is going to be great. Great. So, not sure how to move this thing out of the way. All right. So, my goal today is that all of us, maybe through this solution discussion, I want to also kind of leave with a renewed focus on building great culture in your part of the organization. And the format, so like I said, I have a couple of slides just to set the stage. This is a very technical topic, building cultures. And so I've prepared a couple of slides here that I want to share with you in the next 15, 20 minutes. I have some stories, some examples, and then I have planned an individual activity, assuming we all have laptops. Since we don't, we'll just talk through it. I'm hoping that it's a very rich discussion. So appreciate your flexibility in that regard. But there is a material. Anna just sent a link, so I posted it on Workplace. It is available for you all to use it later after the session. Go back and review it, and if it's useful. All right. I think in the interest of time, I think we're just gonna. Sorry, I don't know what to do here. Okay. I will try. All right. Sorry about that. But okay. But there is this culture map tool. It's a simple Excel tool that I have developed that has worked really well for my team. and hopefully that tool will become available to you all as well. So plan is we have a full hour for this session, but I plan to use about 45 minutes for this session. But believe me, I mean, this is such a rich discussion. My team and I, we've been talking about this for over 2 years now. So 45 minutes for this especially with all the challenges technology-wise that we're having, it'll probably be even less. All right. So Vegas rule. My team always implements the Vegas rule. What we say here is basically stay here. And so this is a very safe space for us to share our experiences. So I'm going to be very open, candid, and transparent with you all and share some of the experiences that my team and I have gone through. But please feel free. Let's have a very candid discussion. Now, having said that, there's no pressure. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, because experiences can be very, very personal. Experiences can be very challenging as well and painful at times. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, no pressure. All right. So with that, let's get started. And so why? I mean, why would we want to talk about building great cultures? Well, I did my master's at the University of Illinois. And during my graduation, the keynote speaker was Maya Angelou. Fantastic commencement speech. And one of the things she said during the commencement speech is something that stayed with me forever. And so she said, if you're going to live, leave a legacy. Make a mark on the world that cannot be erased. I think that is so profoundly true for all of us in this room and outside. Leave that legacy, leave that mark, impact the organization, change the world. I mean, that's why we join the lead program each day. And so that's, and doing that, it's your leaders, and if you're trying to make that mark, if you're trying to change the world, and if you're trying to make that impact, at some point, you are going to navigate, you are going to go through that process, building, defining, sustaining culture in your part of the organization. So when the key challenges continue beyond the 2 years that we have lived through as part of this pandemic. Okay. But then, here are two other great quotes. So let's look at Betty Thompson, the Chief People Officer over at Amazon. This is a fantastic quote, which we are all living because we're all going through this process of great resignation. Oh, okay. All right. Feather to the phone. All right. Can you all hear me now? I hope so. All right. So we'll figure it out. Okay. So Betty Thompson said that culture is what motivates and retains talented employees. And with the great resignation that is going on, or the great reorganization, whatever you want to call it, it's just playing out. It's just playing out real time. Ann Rhodes went one step further. She is the founder of People Inc. She's also the CEO. She went one step further, and she directly put the onus of building great cultures on us as leaders. And so she said, our primary influence as leaders in business is always on people. And I think it's a profound case for why building cultures is essential in our organizations, in every organization. Now, I'm an engineer, and so this is all touchy-feely stuff. In my company, there's a rule. We say, in God we trust, everyone else brings data. And so I know that there are many engineers sitting in the room here. So I came prepared. I have data. So here we go. Okay. McKinsey just did a study last year as an aftermath of the great reorganization or the great resignation. It's a great case study. I mean, it's a great report. It's available on McKinsey's website. You can download it. But there is one graphic that just stands out. It's an amazing graphic, and I call it the slide. So on the x-axis, so this is from October 2021. You can download it. The entire report is available online, and it's a fantastic study. Tons of data there. This is one chart that stands out, and here it is. On the x-axis, you have the employers. On the y-axis, you have the employees. The light blue stuff is the one that employees value, more than what the employers think they value. And the purple stuff is the stuff that employers think really, really matters to employees. Really is not quite as important. Huge divide. The purple stuff and the blue stuff just does not overlap. And that's the great divide. That's the great divide. But look at the stuff that is blue, right? So the most important stuff for employees, and many of us are in this situation. I'm one of them because I want that from my leadership, from my senior leadership, from my company. So valued by manager, valued by the immediate superior, the sense of belonging, and then potential for advancement, valued by the organization. All of these things are critical to building great culture. And none of these things are apparently being addressed effectively in companies because they're focused more on, or we as leaders maybe are focused more on some of the purple stuff. So here is what great culture is. Great culture is where people feel three things. One, they're valued by the direct manager. And there is that immediate, very, very powerful statement about I matter or we matter. And it's something that we experience every day. Every day. I mean, that's the first validation that you're seeking. That's one of the reasons. I mean, it may be subconscious, but that's one of the reasons why we're trying to outdo and shine and do the very best that we can. Second is being valued by the team. I belong or we belong. And many times, people are not necessarily valued by their direct superior, but then the fact that they belong and they have those relationships, that is one of the reasons why they continue to stay with organizations. That is why they continue to contribute, to bring themselves, and do the very best that they can. And third critical component is being valued by the organization. When you have all these three things in full measure, what you have is great culture. The challenge is, how do we get there? It's very easy to put that on a piece of slide and say that, hey, making sure that I matter, making sure that I belong, making sure that we belong, making sure that we are seen. It's one thing to say it. It's quite different to operationalize that as culture in an organization. So let's talk about three core leadership principles. I believe fundamentally that there are three core principles, and here they are. This is what is needed for us to establish, and to create great culture. And again, feels very touchy-feely. I'm going to give you some very, very concrete examples from business world. It's not academic. It's not a book. This is real. And so these are some of the things that we have experienced over the last 2 years, and very, very painfully, I and my team have gone through a bunch of experiences that have led us to conclude that you need three things: care, compassion, and courage. So care is all about looking out for each other. And compassion goes beyond empathy. So empathy is if somebody is experiencing some suffering, as Jeff Wiener says, you experience the same suffering. Compassion goes beyond. Compassion is recognizing that suffering and doing something about it, trying to alleviate it. And third one is courage, is doing what is right. Doing what is right. So with that, let me give you a couple of examples. This is my campus. So I work for ExxonMobil in Houston, and we have the campus that Professor was talking about in the morning, open space. This is a campus in Houston area. We're all co-located. We all work together. Great collaboration. It's awesome. Then when the pandemic struck, none of this was possible. So we work in very close quarters. And because we are not tech, because we are very operation-centric, 100% of our work cannot be done remotely. Virtual is not an option for us. It's just not an option for us. And so we have to work, we have to come to work, and we have to somehow collaborate, and even during the pandemic over the last 2 years, somehow make sure that everybody stays safe. And it created a huge challenge for me and my team. So this is what my team looks like. My team is, like I said, in research and development. We build technology for our business units within the corporation. And so this is what we do every day, in and out, experimental work, building capabilities, building pieces of equipment, trying out new things. And so none of that work can be done remotely. So in terms of care, in terms of looking out for each other, when the pandemic hit, the biggest worry that my team had was job security. Because we had to do a couple of things. One, we had to reorganize our workspace. So we increased the spacing between all different areas where we sit, where we work, etc. But more importantly, places where we run our experiments, etc., we had to make sure that there were only a certain number of people doing their experiments in that given space. We call these ballrooms. There are gigantic rooms. We even installed tag in, tag out tools so that people could know at a given point of time how many people were working in the ballrooms. The challenge was this, that when I installed shifts, so morning shift and an afternoon shift, in saying that, hey, in order to make sure that we maintain social distancing, in order to make sure that we keep each other safe, and this is Texas. So Texas is very different from where we are today, right now here in California. We're wearing masks even today here. It doesn't necessarily happen in Texas. I mean, even back in the peak of the pandemic, there was a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, there's a lot of emotion. And I'm telling you, that emotion is very real. If you have employees that are strong and adamant about it, there is no way you can ignore it and say, hey, let's move past it, let's ignore it, just shove it to the side. This is what we're going to do and lay out some rules. Can't do that. Can't do that. You have to address it. So we had to install these shifts, and people thought, the very first thought was, oh, I'm going to lose my job, and the shifts were extremely unpopular, and it was just very difficult to move past that. So that's where care comes in. We had to repeat that message again and again and again, saying that, hey, this is to make sure that everybody stays safe, looking out for each other, and out of respect. So I showed you the picture before here. You see the gentleman wearing the face mask. It's real. I mean, we are doing a test. He's one of my employees. And so we said, okay, out of respect for each other, we're just going to make sure we're not going to ask questions. Somebody may have, family member who has pre-existing conditions. Somebody may be kids, etc., who are not vaccinated. Whatever the reason, if they're wearing a face mask, like Kevin is here, I'm going to put a face mask just out of respect, without asking any questions. That's care. That's care. So we did that, and gradually people came around. When the numbers went up in terms of just the hospitalizations and whatnot throughout the nation, people began to see the value of that care, value of those requests, and value of those shift mode and whatnot. I mean, it has been a hard journey for us, but that's how we kind of work through it. Okay, so that's care. I want to talk about compassion. Like I said, it goes beyond empathy. It goes beyond empathy. So a lot of our situations, whenever, say for example, if there was a real need for people to work remotely, which again it's 180-degree flip from tech here, because nearly 95%, 99% people probably are working virtually even now, and they are gradually going to go back to work, to offices. In our case, it's different. 99% of the people are actually working in the offices, managing through the pandemic, vaccinated, not vaccinated, whatever it is. You are there, and you're somehow navigating through all of that, making sure that everybody stays safe. So for those 1% people, when we allowed people to work remotely because of their family situation, their kids, elderly, or maybe their own personal pre-existing conditions that required them to work remotely, there was a lot of pushback. People thought that that was not fair. People thought that that was something that should not be done. Some people were getting an easy pass, or all kinds of things. So here we tried an experiment. We have safety meetings in my team because safety is critical to us. It's a core value for us. We run experiments. We deal with high pressures, high temperatures. There is operational risk that we manage every day. So every Monday and Friday, we have Zoom safety meetings. And so you see a couple of examples up there. where people are presenting, they're talking about, hey, what are we doing this week? What's going on? How are we managing these risks, etc. We changed the format of that Zoom meeting. We instituted something called as one good thing. One good thing. So at the end of every month, you have this entire Zoom screen, and what we did is we just went around from window to window to window, inviting each person to share one good thing that happened to them that month. One good thing. And it was about, so for example, hey, last week, my kid participated in a competition, did really well. Or last week, my mom was hospitalized and she's recovered, she's back at home. People spoke up. People shared personal stories. 30 seconds. And we talk about storytelling, we talk about innovation playbook here. You should hear the stories that people came up with. And these are hardcore, operational guys, just working on equipment and things like that. But they just came up with such inspiring stories. People talked about their pets. People talked about their grandmothers. People talked about their kids. People talked about their own well-being. Hey, I heard some bad news. I had to go to the doctors. Turns out this month, diagnosis came back, feeling a lot better, etc. Whatever it is, it just humanized us all. People began to see each other not just as colleagues, but as friends and more than that. We became a family. And that compassion just, it just poured through. Try it out. Just next time you're on a Zoom call, 30 minutes. It's not a lot. And people don't have to share anything profound. They don't have to share something that they're not comfortable with. It could be as simple as, hey, my dog. I did a run. I went for a jog with my dog last week. It's great. Hadn't done that in a couple of weeks. As simple as that. Stories come out, and it just humanizes people. It's just fantastic. We do that even today. The pandemic is on a decline. We are pretty much back. There's no such thing as, we're pretty much 100% back in the office, but it has been such a great experience. We continue to do it even today. Third one is courage. I don't think I can talk about courage without talking about what's going on right now in Ukraine and the leadership that President Zelensky has shown. And so this is from the article. Adam Grant. There are so many articles out there. Adam Grant just recently did an article. It's available on Inc. The picture that you see is from The Economist, and this is right about the time when Zelensky actually did a live broadcast on Twitter saying that he's still in the country, because there was like fake news that said, hey, he left, moved to the West, and he abandoned his people. None of that. Yes. Thank you. And what a great example of courage. Can't beat that. Can't beat that. This is one story that I have from my company where I saw courage from some of my colleagues and just blew me away, because I don't know if I could have done that myself. So it's April 2020. The pandemic is at its peak, and nobody's flying. Nothing's happening. The whole planet is shut down. Everybody is locked down. We went through this. We remember that. Right about that time, we're doing a bunch of drilling in the Permian, which is in Midland. It's in Texas. It's a couple of hours north of Houston. It's a very short flight, 1.5 hours or something like that, maybe even less. And we had a major operational issue, and my team's support was requested. At that time, we were not seeing anybody out, and this request was pretty urgent. 4 members of my team were asked to fly out to Midland and support operations real time, 24/7 for a couple of weeks. I don't think during the pandemic, I have 2 kids, 7 and 11-year-old. I don't think I would have taken on flying, going anywhere, risking. There were no vaccines. Remember, vaccines did not come out. They were not available at that time. This was somebody stepping up and doing what needs to be done. And so here are 4 people. I told them that, hey, on Friday we sat down, we said, hey, here's the situation. I'm not mandating anything. I'm just asking you, there's a situation, think about it. Talk to your family members, and some of them have 4 or 5 kids, have elderly parents who have pre-existing conditions, and all kinds of things, married and whatnot. So it's family members to worry about, to think about. So I told them, go talk to your family members, and if you come back and say, no, I'm not comfortable traveling, no is a perfectly acceptable answer. They went back, they had the conversations that they needed to have with their family members, came back on Monday, and all of them said yes. All of them said yes. I don't know, honest to God, I don't know if I could have taken that step myself. Amazing courage, amazing courage. So here's what happened. All 4 of them flew out. They shipped all the equipment. They were given a trailer, and they converted that trailer into that live lab. Samples were brought in. They isolated themselves in a bubble. They flew, after flying out, they completely isolated them from the entire operational team, camped out in that trailer, took all the groceries for 2 weeks. And all 4 of them, because they were always in touch with each other, those 4 were the only people that I actually came in contact with. Throughout those 2 weeks, they set up the lab there. So this is that picture. And for 2 weeks, round the clock, in 2 shifts, 2 12-hour shifts, 24/7, they did the analysis. They cooked their meals as a family, stayed in the trailer. And they were talking to their kids, their family members, etc. I was talking to them every morning and every evening to see how they are, how things are going, etc., their well-being. And they were talking to their family members after the end of their 12-hour shift. Amazing. It was just so amazing to see the impact that they had. So did all the analysis there, and just made it happen. We were able to successfully achieve what we needed to achieve, got the job done. For 2 weeks, they stayed in that trailer and just courageously did that. And was, again, it's something that that just speaks courage to me. So that's what I have. Those 3 stories. I would like to just take a pause here, maybe invite some comments, reactions. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So thank you for that question. Great question. We had to go secure, even after they said yes, we had to go secure vice president's approval, all the way to the top of the chain, president's approval, in order for them to fly and travel, undertake that travel. If they had said no, we just would not have sent anybody. Operations would have been left on their own to figure out whatever. They would have continued, and it would have. I don't know operationally what would have happened in terms of the success, etc. Different operational decisions would have been made out in the field. Yes. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yep. That's right. That's right. So this was the situation serious enough. I'm not going to go into details because of the proprietariness of the information. Obviously, this was a situation serious enough that called for even that question. Had it been optional, had it not been necessary, had it been nice to have, I don't think that question would have been even asked at that point of time. But the fact that, so I'm just saying the situation was serious enough where stuff that they did would not have happened without their support. So their support was absolutely vital and absolutely critical. We recognized it, but we knew that it's not something that, I didn't, there is no way I would have I would want to mandate that. If, Right. Right. That's right. Yep. It is. It is. I, my personal opinion, I think in the last 2 years of pandemic, we lost a lot of that was good about human beings. Passion has just taken a back step. We were just talking at lunch, dual career families. Somebody had to make a decision to stay back home and not work, either the dad or the mom, and just sacrifice. Sacrifices have been made, and that has really changed our outlook towards what purpose is and what meaningful work is and what our contribution is. Everybody has taken a step back and self-assessed on what's the big picture? What's the big picture? What are we trying to achieve out of? So it's no more the daily grind, and pandemic just gave us all that perspective to step back. Right. I mean, care, compassion, and courage is not the stuff that we talked about in 2019 or even 2018. Thank you. I mean, really appreciate that. Right. Yep. I'm not going to ask. Exactly. Absolutely. And that's so true. Um, sorry, I maybe I interrupted you. Yeah. Yeah. So right. So if I had the skills, and I'm not saying that I would have said yes. I probably would have come back and said no. If I had the skills, and even if I was prepared to travel, even if I was prepared to travel, I don't have the skills necessary. So this is work that those poor people, and only those poor people in my part of the organization could do. There are other skills, people have other skills, etc. But that particular task called for those poor people and could not have been done without those poor. The other thing worth noting is that we did two 12-hour shifts because, stuff's happening. The operations are already happening. They're not going to stop because somebody's not available or somebody's catching a wink or sleep or snoozing, etc., or, they need some rest, etc. So we really needed two people for 12-hour shifts, going all the time for 2 weeks, 24/7. So if one person had said no, again, back to the question, would we have done that? Maybe, but it would not. I doubt if it would have been as successful, and it would have just created more jeopardy for us. It would have forced me to make different decisions for sure. Thank you. Yeah. So not sure if I have a silver bullet for that, Nirmal. And fantastic question. Um, I mean, changing culture, and especially in a company like mine or in an industry like mine, takes time. It takes time. It's not something that will happen overnight. Um, when this story, the last story that I hear mentioned about courage, that got recognition obviously all the way to the top. And they were given a safety award. They were given like above and beyond recognition award and things like that. It was noticed. I'm sharing the story in a minute or two here. I mean, it got a much wider splash within the corporation. Stuff like that gets noticed. But then also some of the other things regarding what we are doing in terms of compassion, in terms of care. How did we manage to keep our operations going, lab going, and everything else was shut down. Every other part of ExxonMobil was working remotely except three parts of the organization. One was mine. And so that kind of stuff, especially during the peak of the pandemic, received the right attention that it deserved. I'm not saying that necessarily means the culture changed everywhere, but definitely there was that cascading of those sentiments and that thought, and so much so that these three are now part of our core values. So we just revamped our leadership framework, and one of the things we've done is included them explicitly as core leadership behaviors. Yeah. So it is all about building a culture that is inspiring, building a culture where we're purposeful, where we are conscientious of the contributions that our employees, our staff, our teams are making, and we're recognizing that there are real sacrifices, especially in the light of the pandemic now. There are some real choices and sacrifices that people are making to help make impact, to make things happen, to get things done. And we can't trivialize that. So it's about bringing your whole self to work. We have always said that. We've always now bringing your whole self to work means everything that is happening at home, because the pandemic. I mean, the virus doesn't know. There's no boundary. There are no distinctions. So what happens at home, part of that people are going to bring. That is their whole self. That is their whole self. So if they are going through a particularly difficult situation at home, you have to take that into account. Make sure that you recognize that and look at it holistically. Thanks. Nisha? Yeah. So yeah, great question. The the biggest struggle is basically changing mindsets. Um, this is so what I've just described in maybe the last 20 minutes is the journey that we have had over 2 years. We went through some very, very tough conversations. When your team tells you that I'm not going to listen to this mask mandate because it's interfering my ability to get work done, and it's interfering with my ability to come to work and get my experiment running. I mean, so people told me that, hey, 6 hour shift is not enough because my experiment won't run in 6 hours. Sandeep, you have to let me come work for 9, 10, whatever it is, full hours. So I'm not going to step away so that somebody else can come and do their work. It's very difficult to get people out of that mold, and it's going to that next level where people feel safe. It is okay to have that vulnerability, because most of the time people want to separate stuff that is happening away from work and don't want to bring that into that discussion. Right? So yeah. So yeah. So there's no silver bullet. It is just a lot of hard conversations, and you have to believe that what you're doing is right, and You have to have that credibility, and you have to gradually build that credibility with people in order for them to understand that you're doing what is best for them. So up until the escalation of the pandemic and the increase in the numbers, people were not convinced that we were actually really looking out for them. People saw it as basically a senior leadership tool to somehow reduce the headcount, for example. Tactic, right? It's building that trust is hard, and it won't happen overnight. You won't get there overnight. You won't get there just by words. You have to walk the talk, and that takes time. To me, that's the biggest barrier. Kevin? So what about people in your organization? No. So yeah. So this is the other thing. There is no yeah. So every person, I believe, every person is entitled to be grouchy and grumpy at one point or the other in their career, in their day. And that's because, we are bringing our whole self to work, and stuff happens. There's life beyond the office. There's life beyond the workplace. All that stuff is going to come. As leaders, we're not perfect. Our employees are not perfect. The sooner we accept that, the easier it is to just manage that. But once people trust you and they know that they can be themselves and they don't have to be somebody else to try to impress you or try to be somebody else in order to kind of fit that mold of part of that corporation and blah, 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 everything else becomes easier. Once they're themselves and you allow them that, empower them to be themselves, and you give them that freedom, they are going to bring more than 110%, even with their grumpiness and grouchiness, because the person next to them is going to understand that. Hey, dad's in hospital. Completely get it, man. It's completely fine. I mean, in my case, stuff has happened to me. I told my team, look, this week, I'm just not going to be my 100%. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just and it's amazing just how much compassion and empathy your team can demonstrate if you just open yourself and be that vulnerable and be that transparent. Right. Yes. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, right. So I want to separate. Yeah. So that's a slightly different question. This is my personal belief. I don't think there's any place for brilliant jerks in great teams. It can work for a short period of time. Long term, it doesn't work. So in my team, our rule is, or our motto is, ideas compete, people collaborate. Collaboration is one of the things we look for in terms of hiring people at least in my team and in our part of the organization. The very best talent, the most talented people, if they're not able to exhibit that collaboration, if they are not able to work as part of the team and look for the greater good of the team beyond their self, they may be a great fit elsewhere, but not in our part of the organization. Yeah. So, and here's one way to do that, right? So those conversations are difficult. Everything that you all are talking about is complicated. How do we operationalize this? And so I built a tool. So again, turn to design thinking. And so the question we are asking is, how might we take our culture in our teams, in our part of the organization to that next level? And so there are 3 steps. And so what I did is basically built a very simple Excel tool, which I've used with my team to force those tough conversations, to force those hard conversations. And of course, I was part of that. So I used the Excel tool to basically quickly assess. So in this case, we're not going to do that today, but it helps in quick diagnosis of where we are, what's happening, we move from that to maybe some sort of reflection, discussion of results, and it's not a 10-minute discussion, it takes longer, but then based on that, commit to some kind of an action. And so this is what the tool looks like. I hope it's zoomed enough where you all can see it. So it's a 3x3 matrix. And here it is. And so that's available on the SharePoint. You should be able to use it. You can download it. You can share it with your team. First thing is you fill it out yourself. Fill it out yourself. Look at your personal care, compassion, and courage. Where are you in that journey? You know, are you taking care of yourself? Are you demonstrating self-compassion? Are you going, because, you know, we can be hard on ourselves in order to set, meet those high standards, high benchmarks that we have set for ourselves. Are you demonstrating the courage that is needed, that you need, that your team needs, that your corporation needs? And then work your way out from yourself to your team, and then to your company. And so if you score it as a 1, and this can be a very quick exercise, if you think there is a high level of alignment, there's high level of care, compassion, and courage going on, that's a 1. If it's kind of medium, it's okay, could be better, that's a 2. And if it's not working well, then it's a 3. Identify areas where it's a 2 or a 3. Have your team fill it out. Don't show them your results. Don't show what your perspective is on the situation. Let them fill it out. Do a Zoom poll. I mean, be creative about it. There's so many different ways that you can work this. Come back in a room, look at the results, and it's just going to give you tremendous insights in terms of where you are and where your team is. Kevin? So this is my personal score, for example. And so in my case, basically, going back to, I think, Nirmal's question on how do you operationalize and scale it. So I worry about, in terms of like the compassion and the courage that the corporation needs to show, et cetera. Just, my understanding of it. Am I seen? Is my team seen? We're all the way at the bottom of the food chain in my part of the organization. We're R&D. We're not necessarily business. We don't make money. We are not a P&L. We're not necessarily seen. We're not the first people to come to mind when we're talking about the organization, so to speak. So, yeah. 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 No. So, right. So this is a very quick, exactly. So I agree with you, Neha. So this is intended more as just to get a pulse of where we think we are, as leaders, as part of our team, as part of our organization, and then get a pulse with your team as well. There's no, it's pretty subjective in that sense. But then it opens, once you go through this exercise, it opens up a whole lot of conversation, should open up a lot of conversation between you and your team, and should really set that foundation for a very candid and clear dialogue. At least it will help you identify where the gaps are. But my apologies. What I'm thinking of. Yep. Yes. The way I like that. In your level, so your team, others that hear me. Yeah. Yep. I think is because this one. Right. But I'm going to. So somebody would say you are medium or low at here. Yes. Well, so what? So yeah. If here consists of A, B, C, D. Right. And A, B, that means the difference. Absolutely. Now, completely agree. And those are the kind of conversations, because when you say, do I matter, every employee is going to give you a different answer. And that's just going to give you so much rich feedback, 360 feedback in terms of the blind spots that we have as leaders, where we think it should be working well, but it really is not. Thank you. Yeah, so I think the tool also works for teams that are virtual. So I have part of my team sits in India, and so we administered this to them as well. And again, their situation, for example, the rate of vaccination, things like that, it's a very different timeline compared to what's going on within the U.S. We had vaccines available, all three. India did none. The percentage of vaccination in the U.S. versus India, night and day, night and day. And so the way they filled out these and the way they talked about it was dramatically different from the conversations we were having in the U.S. Right, right. That's true. So what happens is at, at, at minimum, at least those conversations happen. At least you become aware of those things that people are experiencing at their level, as in their from their viewpoint, um, and and at least it makes you aware. At least you can demonstrate that compassion. You can definitely empathize. You can definitely do more than that. Demonstrate compassion and help them out with that situation. At least understand why they may be behaving or way the performance has been or whatever it is. How that's impacting the way they're bringing themselves to work or the way they're contributing to the team virtually. Puts more context around it. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it's a starting point. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Sophie, go ahead. Yes and no. So everyone has a different perspective on what that care, compassion, and courage would look like. Doesn't have to. It could be geographic. It could be something else. Um, but I would say one thing is that if you don't have care, if there's no care, care is not green. There's no way compassion is going to be green. Because one, there is a starting point. You have to care about other people. You have to make sure that you're looking out for each other before you can even go ahead and demonstrate that compassion, demonstrate that understanding. Um, and so we have done it both here in the US and in India. I think fundamentally, we have a lot more in common as human beings, irrespective of our geographical location, irrespective of our cultures and communities we come from and things like that. Uh, and maybe that's a positive of this pandemic is that it has given us that common experience that we can all relate to. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yes. Right. Absolutely. To start. Yep. No, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I know we're almost at the end of time, so thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I think, final thoughts. Thank you so much. Thank you for, obviously, the slide doesn't apply, but I really want to thank you so much for such a great discussion. And I learned much more than, than all of you all. So thank you for this experience.